Welcome to the Talking Right podcast, a bastion of conservatism in a wasteland of progressivism. Now, here's your host, John Mosman.
Hello, everyone. This is John Mosman. You're listening to Talking Right podcast. It's so good to be here with you on this beautiful August day. We're towards the end of August, and as fall comes into effect, we review a lot, I think, on kind of like the past of the year, and we review a lot on things. You know, you got this idea of going back to school. Kids are going back to school. The fall always, to me, had seemed like something that had it was about opportunities. You know, it was about starting anew. And for those who I'm sure already know, the shootings that occurred yesterday in Virginia are just, they're horrific. I mean, I don't know what else you can say to describe how senseless this act of violence was. And we can go and talk about some of the things that are happening. You know, I have gone out on my social media accounts and have said that this is an interesting issue where this guy who was the shooter, I'm not going to even say his name, I don't want to give him the credence, who shot this reporter and shot this cameraman, Allison and Adam, and you know, he obviously was motivated by race, was one of the factors. And I think as the investigation goes, we can't say too much yet, but I think it's enough to give some kind of merit to the fact that there was a definite huge amount of race related to the shooting. Even if he felt, which from all accounts was unjustifiable, because he was probably a grumpy man who felt he was entitled to things. And let's be honest here, there is a huge segment growing within minority populations that believe in entitlement, and that if they don't get entitlement, if they don't get what they think they should have, they think that they're being prejudiced against, that they think that there's racism. And I think we need to talk about that issue. I've kind of talked about it before in both my podcast on the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as on my podcast, which is the very first one that I did. By the way, it's a pleasure to be doing the 10th episode here, and I hope, by the way, you can kind of look at what we've done these last 10 episodes and kind of see where I'm going with the direction of this podcast. And I kind of see these first 10 episodes as kind of almost like a preseason, if you will. We are in the preseason of the NFL, and I think duly right, it should be considered that this podcast is kind of in a preseason. And that these first 10 episodes were kind of practice episodes to kind of get into the spirit and to get in top shape with them. And I think going forward, you're not going to see as many. I've said that now. In fact, I'm not going to be doing anything podcast or internet related. I'm taking a sabbatical from the internet for a couple of weeks. And then in a couple of weeks, I will be coming back with some new podcast and a new blog. But I kind of wanted to start on this last day of internet for me to talk about this issue. And I wanted to talk about it now instead of talking about it 2 weeks later, because I think it's important that we talk about what had happened in Virginia, and I think it's important that we talk about why this guy, this scum, felt like he had to take these two lives. Especially these two people whose lives were going. They had dreams, they had aspirations, they had hopes and ideas about how their life should be, and all of a sudden it was snuffed away. And it's the same thing with any other shooting, right? The loss of life and the loss of potential life is so devastating. Whether you kill 20 people or whether you kill 2 people, it's still a devastating tragedy. But I think it's important that we look at the intentions of this person who shot them. Because if we're going to talk about the sick young man who shot up the church in North Carolina, then we need to look at these kind of situations where there's reverse racism going on. And unfortunately, our media doesn't want to do that job. We don't want to ever come across as being critical on some of these things because, let's face it, there's a lot of white liberal people in the media, and they have this idea of reverse racism, and they have this idea of, not wanting to continue the plight of the minority, especially the black man, by saying something that black man or black woman or what other minority may like or not. And the issue here is not to talk about whites versus minorities. It really isn't, because we talk about it too much in this country. We talk about race too much in this country. Race isn't going away. Race will never go away as long as there are people who have 2 different skin colors. And you're always going to have that. Unfortunately, the key to curbing some of these things is to talk about things and to call out when there are people out there who take advantage, who extremely take advantage of these situations. When it's convenient to talk about it. Hillary Clinton and Terry McAuliffe, and for those who don't know who Terry McAuliffe, he was a former DNC chairman. He's now governor of Virginia. They both came out yesterday and made political speeches on the event. And it seems now more than ever, but it's like every time there's a shooting, whether it be 1 person, 2 person, or a mass shooting, the Democrats, especially people like Hillary Clinton and Obama and Terry McAuliffe and a lot of all these other guys and gals over there on the left, feel like it's their opportune time to talk about gun control. And I say, how dare you? How dare you politicize this moment of tragedy? These people haven't even been laid to rest yet. And you want to try to be like vultures and use this as a rallying point for something that will not do the trick. First of all, what is the point about talking about gun control anymore, other than it is about a one-sided idea that the only way to curb gun-related crimes is to stop having guns? Okay, if we can imaginarily take that, of course, there's problematics of that idea. First of all, by making those kinds of laws, only law-abiding citizens are gonna lose their guns. Criminals who can get their guns on the black market are not gonna lose their guns, and they're still gonna shoot people. Has this government not learned anything about the war on drugs? Has this government not learned on anything about when you decide to make a war on something that you usually don't do well? I'm sorry, it's the case. And I think that before we talk about this and before we go into this idea, because first of all, there are problems with that idea that if you got rid of guns, then violence would go significantly down. Okay? That's not going to curb violence. Okay? Violence has happened ever since a person could pick up a rock and hit somebody over the head with it. Alright? And in a lot of ways, it's a more violent way to go than being shot. But even if you could do that, even if you could, you're not going to get rid of all the crime. You're not going to get rid of a lot of violence. You're not going to get rid of the reason for violence. And it seems today on the left that when it comes to gun control, when it comes to talking about these kind of situations, they want to blame inanimate objects, right? Back in the early 2000s, there was a huge thing where it was about blaming SUVs for all these deaths, because there's obviously a huge thing in the media and politicians about blaming SUVs, and you would read these outrageous news stories about how an SUV kills two people, right? Um, it's the same thing. It seems people on the left who are supposed to be the more intellectual ones, the ones more in tune with science, the ones who are more in tune with what's hip and cool, and aren't a bunch of stodgy traditional Christians who are living in the 1300s or whatever, their ideas, right? Whenever they want to attack conservatives on quote unquote the war on women, which is another subject we'll get into some other time. But they like to use these objects. They like to use these things where they become the center of the focus instead of people. And it's like, hello. This guy would have killed these people even if he didn't have a gun. Did the gun aid him in that? Yes. But you say, well, there you go. It aided him. It made it easier for him. Well, of course it made it easier for him. Just like someone getting in a car is going to make someone easier to kill someone if they live across the street, if they live across town, if they live across state. Should we start banning guns? Cars? Obviously, as technology adapts, we have people now who are hacking. Hacking crimes now on the internet. It's funny. I was watching this show from it was like the early 90s, and they were like, "Oh, I'm a hacker," and it's them just showing them really kind of hacking someone's DOS. It's really kind of it was just really kind of ancient kind of type of hacking. And right now, in our day and age, hacking is at an all-time high. It's so easy for a lot of people. And so many of our systems are integrated on the internet that all you have to do is shut down the internet or shut down someone's website and release all this private information, or do a lot of harm. So does that mean because there's a lot of people out there who can do a lot of harm by shutting down the internet, that we should get rid of the internet? The internet that has been seemingly one of the most important tools of connecting people and getting information out there and allowing people to share thoughts. We should shut that down. The same internet that allows you to connect with your voters, the same internet that allows you to spread your message, you're going to shut that down? No, you're not going to shut that down. And part of this we have to be honest here. The left and the Democrats have had excuse my French, a hard-on for getting rid of guns. Because they don't like guns. They don't know how to use a gun. Most people I know who are critical of guns and are advocates of ultra gun control don't understand that gun control is not an issue of limiting guns. It's not an issue of making it harder to get guns. It's an issue of knowing how to use the guns. And I agree. People who are not in the right frame of mind shouldn't be using guns. But again, it's one of those things where, at what point do you realistically think you can do that? And to just take this shooting, this devastating moment, and to spread your message, to politicize this event. Well, shame on you, Hillary Clinton. Shame on you, Terry McAuliffe. Shame on you. This is a tragedy. And we need to find out how we can avoid some of these tragedies, but it won't be from eliminating guns. It's going to be, how do we spot people who are prone to gun violence, who are going to be prone to using a gun? From everything I can tell, this guy looked like he kind of was upset, that he was always trying to manipulate people. He was always trying to get things, because apparently he was gay. Don't quote me on that, but from what I understand, from what I heard in the news, that he might have been a gay man on top of being a black man, and so that there was a lot of things that he was angry about. And this guy's issue wasn't mental health. And I think that's another thing we have to realize too. And unfortunately, some people on the right want to just dice everything up to mental health. It's not always an issue of mental health. Sometimes it's an issue of evil. Sometimes it's an issue of stopping them. Because I hate to break it to you, you Democrats, you liberals sitting in your Starbucks, trying to pretend a life that could be with peace if there was no guns. Wake up. Because if you go to the Middle East, there's massive killings being done, and they're using one of the most barbaric, most archaic weapons still around. A sword. Look what they're able to do with a sword. So, wake up to what the problem is. Instead of placating evil. Instead of saying these people who do wrong are just misguided. Wake up. And understand there is evil in this world. And sometimes we can't always stop it. That's why situations like what happened in Virginia is a tragedy. It's because in some ways you couldn't have stopped it. This guy knew exactly what he was doing. He had a plan to do it, and it would be very hard to I think the more we find out, we may find out more that this guy probably may have had some mental health issues, but he might have been able to disguise them well. And if we're going to talk about mental health for a second, let's talk about the fact that it started in the Reagan administration. I'll admit it started in the Reagan administration, but it became huge during the Clinton administration, which was shutting down all of these mental hospitals. We're so busy, and I understand why, trying to get people off and not them go to jail because they may not have the right frame of mind. But they need to be put somewhere. They need to be put in a mental hospital. They need to be dealt with. And we need to do more proactively about it. But what we do is we have to learn from the situation. And I'm going to guess that a lot of facilities, a lot of news agencies, that when they go on location, they'll have someone standing by. Because if you watch the video of this creeper, and I don't recommend you guys watch it, both the broadcast video and the video that this creeper broadcasted is disturbing material. So you don't have to watch it, but take my word on it. It was devastating. You could see that he knew what he was doing. He was taking his time. He was creeping up, and he knew that he had them. He's just out there brandishing a gun for at least a minute. No one sees him. He lines up his shot, and he kills these two people who had so potential and had these dreams. And I think it's important that we talk about dreams. I'm actually all in favor of us talking about dreams because you want to know something? If we talk about dreams, which I think we could, I think we should talk about dreams. We could talk about the dreams of people who want to come over to this country and make this country their home. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about immigration, and let's talk about more on dreams when I return. Because I think there's something to it. Be right back. By the way, you can donate. Go to my website, johnrosen.net, to find out more on how to donate to help this podcast do better. We're back, like I said, and sorry about that. I had to take a quick break to blow my nose. We've been having a lot of smoke here because of the Washington fires, and I think there was another fire in Utah, and I think there was another one in Idaho, if I'm correct, that have just we're starting to see it clear out a little bit, but for like the last week, there has just been massive amount of smoke in the air, and you just can't see the mountains, and that's unusual for me because I'm used to seeing the mountains. I love the mountains. So we're talking about dreams, and we're talking about, people who have these dreams. And I get the dream of wanting to come to America. And there was a point where that dream was pure. There was a point when that dream actually led to something that was useful for the Americans. We talk about immigration, and we don't yet talk about the most important issues about immigration. We don't talk about the fact that immigrants don't do what they used to do. Back in the day, you were an immigrant, there were times when actually the country would ask for you to do service in the government, like in the military. There would be times when our government, you'd come over and you'd work hard and you'd set up a business. And you would either deliver some kind of great, authentic kind of food of your culture in a restaurant, or you had some kind of productive business. I have a friend whose family came here, and they were able to open up some banks when they migrated to the United States. So, it's great when you can able to do those kinds of things. The American immigrant has changed in, say, the last 60 years, 50 years, 40 years. And we used to have more and more immigrants who came here who wanted to come to this country so that they could take an opportunity to make something of themselves, whether it be opening up a business, or raising their kids and producing great citizens. We're not seeing that happen as much as anymore. Now what is happening is, especially from down south, I'm sorry to say, we're seeing a lot of immigration of people who are coming here who are looking to get access to health care. We're getting people who are coming over here who are looking to come and come into this country so they can work and then send their money back to Mexico. We've got people who are coming here who have no intent on really doing much for the communities. A lot of them are doing much for themselves. And so I guess in some sense, I think people who are ultra pro-immigration. Okay, and let me tell you, I am pro-immigration. I believe in immigration. I believe in the ideas that if you come to America and you have the idea of wanting to build something for yourself and your family, that it genuinely will be a great benefit to this society. And I do agree that to some degree, a lot of what happens in our economy is a benefit of labor that has come from down south. But we also have to say what's really going on here and understand why so many people and so many politicians want just amnesty. They want just an open end, whatever, come on in. It doesn't matter what your plans are. It doesn't matter if you don't want to learn the language. Let's just come on in, and who cares if you're going to work and then not pay hardly any taxes and then send almost all of your money back to Mexico. Okay, how does that help America? And we have this idea, well, we have all this labor, right? We have all this labor that's coming into the country, cheap labor. Okay, it's good for those businesses, but you know what? Here's something you don't understand. There are a lot of people who need jobs. And there's a lot of people out there who aren't getting jobs because of this. We've allowed a lot of people to skirt by with these laws because it is advantageous for them to have undocumented workers working for them. We're not talking about the fact that there are many companies out there and many business people out there who have taken advantage of this system, who have taken advantage of this and probably for all intent purposes do more to help themselves and their country. And so I think that if you're going to come to this country, I welcome you, but what are you going to do? We've got people who are in this country now who are from other countries who do nothing. They're on our welfare. They get free education, they get free welfare, while there are many Americans out there who are starving. There's many Americans out there who are struggling to make ends due. And I think it's completely unrealistic and, quite frankly, completely out of fantasy that people on the left, the Democrats, the leftists, the people who are pro-ultra immigration, don't see that, and don't see why people might get upset, and don't see why someone like Donald Trump may actually be a sounding board for a lot of these people. I agree that he probably could do a better job of using his candor right and of dialing down his tone. But if you don't understand that a part of the reason why his popularity is because he is speaking truth to the fact that there have been a lot of immigrants who've come over and killed people and have, done bad things. That can't be obviously a complete, you can't say that of all immigrants, obviously. That would be wrong and a generalization. But that problem has existed sometime. And you can't also deny the fact that people who really just want a citizenship, an immigration that is lawful. They want people to follow the law because they have to follow the law. If you can't understand why they're mad and then go around and turn around and call them racist for being mad, you're completely out of it. You've completely lost control. So let's establish a couple of things here about immigration that I think are not really being talked about as much. First of all, politicians on the left want immigrants because they are a vote for them. And you know what? These people who are from Latin America, these people who are from Europe, wherever these immigrants come from, most of them are used to dictators, right? So Obama's a little bit up their flavor, right? His candor and how he speaks down to people and the way he says things, where he puts blame on other people, and yet, here he is, the magnificent Messiah who has done all good. Okay, banana republic dictators are probably similar to him, and so they probably don't see too much difference on that. Secondly, the Democrats want him because the Democrats have always wanted stupid voters. I'm sorry. And a lot of their voter base are stupid. I'm going to go out there and say that. Now, excuse me. Sorry. Allergies. If we talk about this, if we talk about the fact, and I'm not going to say all Democrats are stupid. I'm not saying that. I'm saying from a political standpoint that they rely on people who are completely ignorant on the issues. And there are a lot of people who are going to come from this country, come from other countries, that don't understand things like due process. Who are like, oh yeah, well, let's get rid of the Second Amendment, right? They don't understand the culture of guns in this country. They don't understand the importance of the Bill of Rights. And why should they? They've been raised in dictatorships and socialist countries, and this is why the Democrats want them, because they're not going to do anything. They're just going to do it as long as you give them food, medicine, they're okay with it. So let's talk about the fact that there's a political economic gain from the Democrats wanting to bring them in, and let's talk about all these business owners who go to their lobbyists to the right and get the Republicans to vote off on it. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. Let's now center on the next issue. And the next issue is the fact that you have a good amount of people here who are feeling very disenfranchised by the fact that we're willing to break all kinds of laws for these people to come in here, and yet we're really rigorous on people following the law who are natural-born citizens. And there's an inconsistency here. And you get people who are feeling like there's some unfairness going on here, and it's limiting these things. So let's talk about those things. Let's talk about one of the reasons why people justify immigration this way, and that's the 14th Amendment. We're talking about it. Trump has brought it up. The idea that some people call anchor babies, the idea if you come here and your child's born, they become a U.S. citizen, it's easier for the parent to become U.S. citizens, and then yada, yada, yada. So let's first of all realize that 14th Amendment might need to be re-looked at. And if you look at some of the words, it talks about underneath the jurisdiction, meaning they're under the authority of the government. So the government could make a decision to say, you know what, I want you to go through a different process. Now, there was a time in the 80s and the late 70s when we did that with Cuban refugees who were coming to America. We knew we just couldn't just let them come in and fully integrate into society until we could figure out who they were, especially because there would have been a whole 20 years of fighting Cuba in a Cold War over communism. So, I think we have to look at, maybe going back to some of those things where we set up facilities for people to stay at until we can get them fully documented and get an idea of what's going on. And some people will say, well, why should they do this? Why should we reform this amendment? Why should we do those kinds of things? I think it's very funny, first of all, that there are a lot of Democrats and a lot of liberals who are holding strong, very fundamentally, on the idea of what the 14th Amendment says. And yet when it comes to other amendments, especially the Second Amendment, are trying to be loosey with how they redefine it. I think I smell a bit of hypocrisy here. And you know what? If you're going to say, well, let's do things like Europe does when it comes to social medicine, if you're going to say, let's do what Europe does when it comes to gun laws, then why don't we do what Europe does and other countries do when it comes to immigration, which is more stricter? But no one wants to talk about that, do they? No one wants to talk about that kind of hypocrisy that's going on. But the issue of immigration is this. We have to acknowledge all of these things, and yet at the same time say, how do we do it? How do we do a process? Because what we have to realize is, one, our process for people to become citizens, it kind of needs to be changed a bit. I think there are certain things in it that need to be changed in the process. I think we need to make it a little bit easier for people. I agree that we need to make it a little easier for people to become immigrants, because it would lessen people who feel like they have to jump over the border, right? They have to come across the fence kind of thing. Second, we need to have a way of securing the border. And that's not just going to come, I don't think it's an issue of just building a straight wall. Maybe in some places where you see a lot of that, but having facilities there, okay. But we also have to have other things going on. And it's not just about physical infrastructure that has to be in place to secure the border. We have to see that there are people who have been for a long time able to take advantage of our laws to come over here. And they have an incentive to do it. And I think that if we shored up some of these things for undocumented workers, if we made them go through a more heavier process in that sense, and I think what we have to do is realize that we have to distinguish between people who legitimately want to come and migrate to this country and be U.S. citizens, and people who just want to come over, work, be undocumented, and send money back to Mexico or Latin America or wherever they came from. And maybe there's a situation where they're coming from other countries as well. That's something I think we have to do, and that's not really being talked about. We're not distinguishing those two things well enough, and we're kind of all lumping them all together. And I'm not about deporting 11 million people who are quote-unquote American citizens. I am about deporting people here who have no intent on making America economically better, who have no intent on making America being a productive citizen, right? And I think it's kind of absurd that some of these Democrats who are for that, and yet the same vein are talking about higher taxes, don't realize that they're coming off as hypocrites, because they're allowing less and less immigrants to pay taxes. And I believe and I need to go out there and I'll do the research, but I believe if you were to look at numbers from a realistic standpoint, I think you're going to see that people who are coming to this country to work, whether it be on visas or whether it be on whatever, are not nearly putting in the same kind of taxation. And that's because there's a reason why. Obama has, and the Democrats have said, that if you're a middle class white American, you're the villain. If you're a Christian, former military, middle class white Christian, you're the enemy. You're the enemy. And I'm going to do everything I can to tax the hell out of you. I'm going to do everything I can to make it life harder for you. And then I'm going to sit around and say, I'm going to make life easier for a bunch of 11 million people to come over to this country. That's absurd. That's absurd. We have to distinguish between people who are coming over here and why they're coming over here. We haven't done that good enough yet. We need to make our laws better, and we need to enforce them, and we need to give the support to the law to border control. But you know what? Our government, our federal government, doesn't want to do that, and so we have problems. There's a lot of things that are complicated that could shore up this problem. And I believe they would be effective in dealing with the issue of immigration. Look, I get it. There's dreams you have, and we all want to pursue those dreams. And I don't want anyone not to pursue those dreams. But I also don't want anybody to use the system just for their gain, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who are Democrats or liberals who would say the exact same thing when it came to big bankers, who come to anyone who takes advantage of a loophole to get something. We have to get rid of that. And we have to get rid of the greed that says, let's allow these people to come in undocumented, let's allow these people to just have amnesty without actually kind of having an idea of what intent they have in coming to America. And we don't do that. We don't have that nearly as effective as it should be. And maybe if we can do that, maybe if we can have some process here, and we have some kind of illusion of saying, you know what, we're not just going to let anybody come in, maybe you're going to get more support from Republicans and conservatives instead of calling them right-wingers and extremists and haters. But I think this is just indicative of the fact that the left is doing everything it can to just ignore and not care about conservatives. And it's feeding a discontent. And maybe they're doing it on purpose. And I've gotten that sense too. And we'll talk about that maybe at another time. I don't know if I feel comfortable talking about that fully out in public, because I do have some theories about what are going on, and I think there are people out there who are specifically allowing people to be in conflict. And we're having more and more conflict, and I definitely think we're having a society where people are now more at their throats than ever. And we gotta change that. We gotta change that, because we are neighbors, and we're in this together. And we're in the supposed best country in the world. We need to make it better instead of just saying that it is the best country in the world. And I agree, there are things we can do to make it better for people to come over to this country and to take advantage of those things, to make them better citizens and to make the process better. But we can also do things to also make sure that we're not just letting anybody come through, that we're not just letting someone come here who has no intent on sharing the same country and the same vision that we all have. This isn't about politics, really, as much as it is about greed. And until we can get that issue solved, we're not going to really get the whole problem of immigration solved. On the issue of dreams, and this is kind of going full circle, when you consider, these people in Virginia who died, who were killed, and the people who come to this country who are seeking refuge, who are seeking something. It's harder. It's getting harder, I think, in this country to pursue your dreams. And that's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that it seems that under Obama we seem to becoming less and less exceptional, and that the whole game of it all is to try to be like everybody else, or to be as mediocre and not have opportunities. It was the opportunities and it was the dreams of freedom that made this country. And it was based on those ideas that allowed America to become the superpower that it was, that allowed America to become a dominant force during World War I and World War II. Were there problems with America? Has there been problems with America? Absolutely. We got a lot of problems. But it seems to get harder. It does. I am looking to pursue some dreams of my own. And with that, it's going to mean less time on my blog, less time on my podcast. That's kind of why I wanted to set up all these episodes and a lot of blogs right away, because I wanted to just have something out there so people could listen to it. And then by the time that I start, getting in a full swing of things, it will be better. But I will be taking some time away from social media. I've said that before. And I am going to be taking some time away from the podcast for a couple of weeks. And I'll be back in a couple of weeks. I promise it's going to actually be a couple of weeks. I know I said that a couple of times before, and it was like a couple of days, but there's been a lot of news going on, and I wanted to cover it. But we'll be doing that. We'll be coming back in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be taking some time off, going to head out of town for a little bit, and focus on writing my new book. If you're interested about my book, it's going to be a book about the Revolutionary War. And as soon as I get information about that, on when you can purchase that and when that's going to be available, that will be on my website. Also, everything you need to know, links, everything, go to johnmosman.net. That you can find there. And then there's also a lot of stuff going on my Twitter at JOLEMO376. My Facebook is John Mosman Live, Facebook.com, John Mosman Live. Just stay tuned, because I got a lot coming up, and again, this podcast is going to get better, and I could use your support, and if you really would like to support this, I could use it, because this is a dream of mine, and I hope that I can do it more, and you can find out more about donating by going to my website, johnmosman.net. Goodbye, and have a couple of weeks, and be at peace, be safe.